Welcome to the dOrg Hot Seat. We've got Oren from Gnosis Guild. Gnosis Guild have done incredible work in the ecosystem, especially when it comes to DAOifying the Safe, which is probably one of the most used primitives in Ethereum. I'm obviously talking about the multisig, but yeah, nobody can explain better what Gnosis Guild is and has done than Oren. So can you do us a little bit of a rundown?
I can try, although it's a weird thing to try to explain. We always seem to stumble over it a little bit. But yeah, Gnosis Guild, we build I guess all kinds of different infrastructure for the Ethereum ecosystem, but a lot of it ends up being modules for the Safe to essentially expand what it can do. The Safe has this kind of little known entry point for extending its logic. And so, yeah, we built a whole bunch of different modules that plug into that. We built a standard around it that we called Zodiac, which essentially describes how you can kind of create modules that you can chain together into these arbitrarily complex systems to kind of make any kind of organizational structure, any kind of on-chain account structure that you want. And it's really applicable across the full spectrum of users, from large-scale organizations all the way down to end users. You know, on the organizational side, we have Gnosis DAO, Safe DAO, ENS DAO, Balancer DAO, a whole bunch of others leveraging this tooling in some capacity. And then on the kind of end user side, everything from every Gnosis pay card is leveraging some Zodiac modules on top of their Safe. Every Hopper node is leveraging a combination of modules on top of their Safes. And so, yeah, full kind of spectrum of use cases and users are kind of serviced by this modular infrastructure. And then outside of that, Gnosis Guild kind of operates as I guess a venture studio type organization as well. We incubate some projects internally, have an exciting one we're working on at the moment called Enclave, which is a protocol for coordinating the various different actors in threshold FHE computations. Really stoked to start sharing this. It's still quite early stage though.
Wait, so you mentioned you develop kind of like modules to give functionality to several parts of the Ethereum ecosystem, and you also have a venture studio. Sounds like you're a bunch of nerds with money.
We're a bunch of nerds hoping to make money.
Oh, that works.
No. Works. Yeah. We're definitely a bunch of nerds. I think like the really it took us a while to realize it internally, but we're all kind of obsessed with just access control problems. Kind of every manifestation of access control problems we're interested in. And so,
all right, let's go in there. That's because that's very specific. That's you mentioned the Zodiac standard and a bunch of DAOs, but all these modules. But there's a lot of permissions. There's a lot of thinking about permissions, and you said access control. That's maybe a better way of saying it. Like, where does this, like, why is this such a big problem, and why did you decide to focus there?
Yeah, so most access control in smart contracts is quite naive. It's quite simple, and I mean with good reason. Complexity is costly in terms of gas costs, and is risky in terms of implementation risk. And so most smart contract engineers, when they're building smart contract systems, opt for very simple access control. The vast majority of access control on chain is kind of one of two kind of high-level checks. You're either checking that you are or are not the owner of a given contract. You have this only owner modifier, or you're checking that you have a balance of this token, or you do not. Most, I'd say, ballpark guess, 90+% of access control is one of those two checks. But this doesn't map well to any kind of complex use cases, any kind of complex organizational structures, any kind of more nuanced security setups for both individuals and organizations. And so, yeah, we've I guess put a lot of thought into how do we kind of add more nuanced access control on top of this relatively simple standard way that most contracts handle their access control. And so one route that we've done this that has I guess seen a fair bit of traction so far is our roles modifier, our roles module, which essentially allows you to build arbitrarily complex access control on top of a safe, role-based access control, where you can define a role, add any arbitrary number of members to that role, and then for the role, define the target contracts, target function signatures, target kind of parameters and comparisons between those parameters, rate limits and spending limits and all this kind of thing, to essentially build out a again, arbitrarily complex permission set that can scope and define what members of that role are allowed to trigger the attached safe to do. And so this could be things like wanting to set up a spending limit for someone to run payroll. So, to trigger the safe to do kind of any arbitrary action, you need the full threshold of signers, but maybe you have your whoever's managing payroll for your organization, you trust them to run payroll once a month, and so you can set up the spending limit for them. Or perhaps you've got a DAO that's controlling a safe. You don't have multi-sig signers, but it's a safe. It's a DAO that's governing, say, a DeFi protocol, right? And you need to have a pause button on your DeFi protocol so that in the event of an emergency, you can shut everything down and kind of do damage control. And so you want to give control of that pause button to an entity that can act quickly. DAO governance is typically weeks, if not months, to make something happen. And so a compromise here might be to say, okay, well, elect a security council. Here's 6 of 9 multi-sig or 3 of 9, and some threshold that straddles the line between being able to act quickly and still being kind of trusted enough to have access to push the pause button. And yeah, you set them up a separate multi-sig, and you give them permission through the roles mod to hit the pause button on behalf of the DAO. Yeah, I guess there's two broad examples of how you might leverage something like this, just to build out more nuanced access control on top of a relatively simple base layer of access control.
So how do I use it within let's for an example, we want to give let's say we are dOrg, we operate as a DAO, and we want to give permission to some administrative people that help us administrate payouts and this sort of stuff. They need to be able to trigger certain transactions or to have access to a certain amount of budget. How can we start implementing this? Do we need to implement our own smart contracts? Do we have a UI? How does it work?
Yeah, so no smart contract development needs to be done. So you essentially have this roles mod. It's plug and play. You can deploy it from the Safe web UI in the Zodiac Safe app. For that specific use case, if you're wanting to do essentially set up a spending limit, actually you don't need the roles mod. There is a spending limits module that exists in the Safe already, in the Safe UI already, so you can do spending limits without the roles mod.
Bad example.
No, but actually it's a really good one. It's a great kind of segue into. So this is a functionality that the roles module handles as well, and actually we've just had a PR merged in to add the roles mod into the Safe SDK and as well as into the Safe web application. And so you'll now be able to do this functionality along with a handful of other kind of canned permissions inside of the Safe web UI as well. So in terms of being able to set this up with kind of no code, it's for a limited number of kind of predefined roles. Will be very easy here in the not too distant future. For more complex permissions, we have a SDK you can use to build and then build your kind of permission structure and then deploy it on chain, as in like make the contract calls to enable those roles. And then also have a interface for interacting with applications via your Safe, kind of understanding the route between the Safe, the module, and the account that you're ultimately have kind of some route to controlling the Safe with. There's our pilot application. It's pilot.gnosisguild.org. Really, really cool extension that keeps getting more and more powerful. But one nice thing that this does for you is if you try to do something that you don't have the right role for, it'll spit out an error saying you don't have the right role, but also kind of tell you what you need to do in order to propose that the Safe give you the right role. Kind of tell you the conditions that need to be added to your permissions to be able to allow you to execute that.
Right, so we've got as ways to access roles v2. We have got the UI within the Zodiac modules that you can access on your Safe. There's an SDK that you can use for more complex interactions to like fully customize whatever you want to do. And finally, we've got pilot.gnosisguild.org, where you have like this almost like this visualization of the whole interaction, where like set up in a sort of visual way to understand.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Pilot for a minute because it's super cool actually, and I think like really underrated, but probably will be a bit of a prototype for how a lot of wallets start to interact with applications, or at least I hope it is, because it's a dramatically better user experience. But essentially what it does, right? You set up a route. So you say, here's this Safe that I want to pretend to be. Here's this module plugged into the Safe, and here's my account that has a role in this module. Is kind of one example of a route. It could also just be, here's the Safe, and I'm a signer on this Safe, or kind of any other combination of supported modules. But you say, I'm the Safe, and I'm connected to Pilot with my MetaMask. Pilot is now going to inject the Safe address into every dApp that we connect to via Pilot. So essentially opens up dApps. It gives you kind of a browser view. You can type in any URL you want, and if it's a dApp that you can connect a wallet to, it's going to inject the Safe wallet that's set up in your route rather than your MetaMask wallet, for example. And so now the application thinks you're the Safe. When you click a button that would normally trigger a transaction, rather than asking you to broadcast it right away, it simulates the transaction and essentially like hijacks all of the RPC traffic and then spoofs the result back to the application, which allows the application then to progress onto its next state. Right, so you have all of these applications where you've got kind of at least a 2-click flow: approve and then do something else that transfers from. Right, and so you hit your approve, simulates it, spoofs it back to the app, and then app progresses onto its next state. You hit your next thing, deposit, then stake, then delegate your governance, and then go borrow on Aave, and do this big complex set of transactions that kind of simulates and then spoofs the results back for each one. So you build up this huge bundle of calls, batch that into one atomic transaction, and then hit broadcast whenever you want to actually put the thing on chain. You can know up front that the whole bundle is going to work because it's all been simulated. And for multi-sigs in particular, and for DAOs, I guess like for anything that's more than just a single user, aside from it being cheaper because you're not broadcasting a separate transaction every time, it's also much, much less coordination costs. Like you think about, I don't know if you've ever been on a multi-sig where you're sitting there trying to get a swap done, and you hit approve, and then you hit swap, or you hit approve, and then you wait 2 days for everyone to approve the tokens, and then you hit swap, and you wait 3 days for the swap to go through, and by that time the slippage has
But it has
moved.
exactly
It's
the
out of its
slippage
slippage
moves.
range, and
It's not
yeah. And so then you got to go back and do the whole thing again. And so then you go, okay, we got to get everyone on a call for this, and you've got people spread out over 4 time zones, and one guy's off at 3 a.m. and it takes you 2 hours to get through this simple swap. So this kind of thing radically improves that coordination effort. Where if you're trying to do it synchronously, everyone can sit there and watch you build out this bundle of transactions. You hit submit, you can see it all stimulate, and everyone only has to hit their confirmation in their wallet one time. For an arbitrarily large, within gas constraints, obviously, transaction, and then for the kind of DAO use case, you can impersonate a DAO in any application, go and build out this bundle of transactions, and then submit it to governance. So it makes the kind of transaction building process much more accessible than the current kind of status quo for DAOs.
Right. So it will spit out this transaction bundle that then you can just import into the safe and or like put it into a DAO proposal into like
right.
DAO,
Yeah,
which is how it's called, like Decent or whatever it is, like any on-chain governance thing. You can just speed up this transaction, the code, and like you'll basically have done it manually, the whole thing, like as if you were interacting with the UX, with the UI. But the end result of this will be like, okay, if you now want to do this for real, here's the transaction bundle that you need to put.
Exactly. Yeah. Here's your kind of payload that you go and submit to governance if you want governance to do this. Now, obviously, there's some nuance to how you need to handle that in the case that you're doing things like swaps because of the slippage issues and things like that. So, it's not totally foolproof, but still a radically improved user experience for building a transaction proposal for a DAO, or transaction payload for a DAO proposal.
I think this is really good, UX for non-technical DAO members as well. Now they can they always needed to come to a technical person and say like, hey, this is what I think I want to do, but how do I make this on-chain submission, especially like with protocols, like older protocols, like the old Aragon. I haven't tried the new one, but with the old Aragon, with Decent, like a bunch of them where you just need to transact to put all the payloads. Now non-technical users can use it too. That's amazing. That's really cool.
And then
what do you use to
go ahead, sir.
to do the simulation? Are you using Tenderly just like Safe? Same type of integration?
Tenderly under the hood.
Right.
There's a couple of options that we're really keen to explore, though, as well as Tenderly. I mean, Tenderly is fantastic, but it would be really nice to be able to do this in a way that doesn't necessarily require a third-party API, just for privacy concerns for folks and for performance reasons potentially. Although Tenderly seems to be pretty performant, but the folks at Dark Forest. They've been working on a really interesting. I don't know if they submitted as an EIP yet, but essentially they're wanting to add an extra RPC call, RPC endpoint, which is like essentially to simulate transactions. So they built a fork of it for I think on Nethermind to add this endpoint. I think making an effort to try to get this merged into the various clients, or get this as a kind of standard RPC endpoint, which would be really nice.
Because there's like simulate state transitions, and so you can move on from the next state.
Exactly. Yeah. So this would be really cool. And then I just recently saw this in on Twitter. What did I put it? It's
while you search, this is a good moment to remind your members that you can just write. I know this is fascinating and thrilling, and Orin is so loquacious that it's hard to not become enthralled. But if you have any questions or anything that you want to jump in, it's a good moment to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was tvm.sh. This I just saw yesterday, which looked really cool. Looks like you can basically you get like a in-browser DevNet and can apparently do simulations on that too. So I think we'll explore playing with that. But yeah, Tenderly under the hood. And I think what I was going to say before we started diving into Tenderly there is so obviously for the like organizational use case, the DAO use case, this makes a lot of sense. It radically reduces the coordination costs. But even as an individual, I think it's a pretty radical improvement on the user experience, right? Like if you're interacting with some DeFi application, you think about Curve, for example, you approve, you deposit, you stake, and then you stake. Oh, sorry, you approve deposit, you deposit into your pool, then you take those pool tokens, you approve those, and then you stake them into the Curve gauge, and so you end up with a sequence of like 4, 5, 6 transactions to go from like raw token into like an LP position staked in one of their gauges, and so that's like 4 or 5 different times you've got to interact with your MetaMask and hopefully interact with your hardware wallet if you're securing things well, or if you're using a safe 2 or 3 times that you and have this set up as say a 2 or 3 safe with keys that you control, then this is 4, 5, 6 times that you need to trigger multiple hardware wallets or multiple different EOA accounts in MetaMask or whatever it is to broadcast these different steps. And so by being able to simulate and bundle together each of these different steps and then just execute in one atomic transaction, you end up again with this kind of radically improved user experience, even for an end user. And again, even for an end user that's just using MetaMask, just using an EOA and MetaMask, I think it's a much better experience to trigger MetaMask once for that full bundle of transactions or full bundle than trigger MetaMask every time you press a button in the app.
Right, and not only this, but just knowing what's going to happen next after you press, which is something that you often don't know. You often use this trigger to first approve, and then what's going to be next, and what do like having everything and just clicking, knowing exactly what's going to happen at the end of whatever series. That's
yeah. This is a great point for like especially if this is your first time using a given application. You're totally blind to what the next step is going to be and what the step after that's going to be, and how much if you're on mainnet, how much gas cost this is actually going to end up being. I think this simulation is super underrated and something that kind of a pattern I think will just continue to 2 years from now. I mean, we'd be really surprised if just about every wallet isn't doing it.
Yeah, exactly. It can be like very abstracted from the user in terms of like the user doesn't need to see the full simulation. Just the app will know that whatever was supposed to happen will happen, and at that price, and therefore.
Yeah, this is something I've wondered about a lot as well, actually. For like indexes,
whether the user needs to know.
There's this tendency for applications, right? You'll broadcast a transaction, you'll do some interaction, and you now need to wait for the transaction to confirm, and in a lot of cases, wait for the indexer to pick up that transaction, update the state of the index, and then return that back to the application. And so you end up with this huge waiting time, right? It's 12 seconds to several minutes between when you hit it and when the application updates. And I've always thought that was interesting because if you're reasonably confident that the transaction is going to get confirmed, then in a lot of cases, in the vast majority of cases, you should be able to update the application state immediately, kind of optimistically. Right? You say, this is what we think the application state is going to become once this transaction is confirmed. You should be able to essentially progress on to what the next step should be, update the application state, and then backfill that data once the indexer catches up, and kind of merge any inconsistencies or kind of do some conflict resolution on any inconsistencies.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe when we've got fraud proofs on optimism, we can have an example of how this would work. But until for now,
and so when I
like
say
that.
optimistically, that I don't mean like optimistically with
I know.
I mean like optimistically. All right.
Yeah.
The church just went way over.
There's just no example of anything optimistic working as of now.
Right.
Taking a bit of a pot shot here.
Right.
My bad. But Phil, we've got Phil here with a question.
Yeah, well, actually, this part was super interesting, and I'm quite curious of the UX nightmare that could result of actually something that is optimistically approved in the app and then turn out to be rejected. That would open a very painful can of worm. But yeah, my question was actually not technical. It was more on the business side. I was super interested to. Well, it's crazy that we haven't had the occasion to discuss this, but then I'm really interested to know more about the experience of the guild as a venture studio with respect to the tokenomic synergy, but also maybe on the business focus. So sorry if the question is a bit combining different in one, but we've had some attempts in the past at dOrg of negotiating and part of deals in tokens, so that members are exposed to the success of our customers. But it never really take off. It's mostly an exception rather than a rule. And also, we never really built products within dOrg as a studio, even though we started product like Polywrap. But it was more like spin-off or independent members project. So back to the stance of nerds making money. When do you see most of the value distributed to your guild members coming from in the future? Do you expect building products like Enclave internally will be then, spin off and that you keep a share of the value? And to which extent will you be involved in the actual growth of each project? Because obviously it's super difficult to be at the same time building a project sequentially, but and being properly growing and nurturing each of them.
I think each new project probably implies, if nothing else, probably implies some team growth, right? Like if you want to be able to maintain an internal team, or I guess in either case, like either team growth either as an internal team, or if you spin the thing out into a separate organization, then team growth in that external organization. But if the number of things that you're having to focus on is increasing, then you either need to drop previous focus, deprioritize previous things that you've been building, or grow the team so you can do more in parallel. In terms of Enclave specifically, or I guess maybe more generally, whether a project kind of spins out as a separate organization, or is something that we continue to kind of work on internally, I think is probably project specific, but I'd say like the high level way that we're approaching that now. I should caveat this by saying, for the most part, this is all theoretical. Gnosis Guild is still a very young organization, only spun out last year, and so Enclave is really our first attempt at a venture type thing post spin out. But I'd say that in the case that the thing that the kind of venture that we're pursuing is essentially a protocol, a network, then spinning out a separate entity doesn't feel as necessary. Maybe it makes sense at some point in the life cycle of a project like Enclave to spin up a foundation-like entity. But in terms of having spinning out a separate entity to house the teams that are the team of people that are working on it. I don't know that it's as necessary. Essentially, like we would see ourselves as the kind of initiator of what ultimately becomes a decentralized protocol, and hopefully at some point we're one of many organizations contributing to the kind of growth and success of that protocol. And so having a kind of separate organization there from Gnosis Guild doesn't seem as critical as perhaps in other scenarios. Say if the thing that we've built is more of a SaaS-like product, where.
So, but do you see that as like a playbook, and or is it project specific? It just turns out that Enclave is like that, but in the future you might do like SaaS type project.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could probably be a playbook there, but it could account for kind of at least those two high-level scenarios. You know, maybe we have a separate playbook that we roll out in the case that the thing is a SaaS product compared to a protocol. But again, this is highly speculative, given that we've not rolled anything out that's remotely close to a SaaS product or anything like that. So, for the time being, we're not. Like everyone that's working on Enclave is internal to Gnosis Guild. I don't see that changing in the immediate future. But for other projects in future, if it is the right business decision, then we potentially spin out a section of the team or spin up a new organization and kind of put the right people in place to make that organization successful. And I think in any case, the intent obviously is for Gnosis Guild to retain a substantial stake in those ventures. That's the kind of business model component for Gnosis Guild.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely inspiration. As Phil says, definitely an inspiration for other DAOs with a similar vibe, like dOrg as well. We're running out of time, so we're gonna do one last question from Miri, and it's like, what is your roadmap for the next 2 years? Exciting things coming up. Do it in like a rapid fire kind of thing.
Yeah. I just it's really rapid fire. We don't have a roadmap. We work.
Great. That's right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, guys. We don't have a roadmap. So we very deliberately work in these kind of 8-week cycles, and usually don't plan much more than about 8 weeks in advance. We might have some really loose goals in terms of what we'd like to achieve, or for things like for Enclave, for example. Like we've got some high-level milestones that we'd like to hit, over the next 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year. But they're very, very high level, not specific, because I don't think we think long-term planning in something as fast-paced and as dynamic as the Web3 ecosystem is really quite difficult. And so, prioritization for us, what we work on, happens once every 8 weeks. We sit down together as an organization. Colin and Julio are part of that, and we sit down and basically just chat it out, figure out what we should build for the next 8 weeks, and kind of go from there. This cadence we kind of landed on with the express kind of intent of it being something that over time will be kind of conducive to broader stakeholder input, kind of as Gnosis Guild grows as an organization, takes on additional stakeholders, as a broader kind of stakeholder set. We think that this kind of cadence and this kind of process will be really accessible to a larger set of stakeholders. And I guess maybe the reason that we've been thinking about this is just observing the kind of stakeholder fatigue in a lot of Web3 organizations, where you have this constant flow of proposals and things to keep up with, that make it really, really difficult to actively participate in a DAO in a meaningful way. And so as Gnosis Guild starts to kind of progress along that organizational pathway, it becoming more decentralized, taking on a broader set of stakeholders, we really want to establish this cadence that sets an expectation that people pay attention for a short period of time, a week or something like that, to kind of digest potential things that we might work on for the next cycle, weigh in, and then don't have to think about anything for another 8 weeks. Don't have to actively participate if they don't want to in kind of any governance decisions. And so really thinking about this kind of cadence long term as a way to allow the organization to operate well in a kind of large distributed setting, but also from our point of view, it just allows the engineers to focus in on a project for 2, 4, or 6 week period and not be task switching. I know Julio's probably laughing right now because we still have a bad habit of task switching too much, but yeah. In theory, it should allow us to really focus in on kind of one thing.
Yeah, thank you for explaining the logic. I imagine that comes with like
Seems it froze on Lansky's side.
I was worried it might have been mine. Mine does that every now and again.
Yeah, Lansky, you froze for a moment.
Oh, sorry about that. Well, in any case, we're out of time, but that was an amazing chat, and yeah, I wish we were in the old format where we had a lot longer time, because that was definitely a super interesting conversation. What is there anything that you would like to communicate? Any announcements? Any promotion?
Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't touch on it during the call, but yeah, working on this protocol Enclave, it's essentially a protocol for encrypted execution environments built on fully homomorphic encryption and zero knowledge proofs. We're currently hiring for applied cryptographers. If you know any that are hiding and would be open to joining a really cool team of nerds who like to build access control things, send them my way. You can find out more where we have it posted, probably on our Twitter account somewhere. It's at Gnosis Guild. I'm sure we've got some posts on there that are mention the job opening there. Otherwise, just shoot me a message or at gnosisguild.org.
We'll do that. Fantastic. Yeah.
We've got a question here about FHE Safe somewhere. There's no FHE Safe yet, but let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. Well, that's a project. That's a brand project. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll put everything, all the links to your Twitter in the show notes so people can find it quickly. And I can personally vouch for one of the most amazing teams. So if any of the listeners want to join this amazing team, that's where you should go. All right, guys.
Amazing.
Thank you very much. Have an excellent rest of the day, and we'll see you in Brussels.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Thanks for this. This was a lot of fun.